Okay, I am happy to introduce everyone to Allison White, a transitional kindergarten teacher in the Los Altos School District. And so she is going to be presenting the Curious Classroom using AI to foster agency, equity, and inquiry as it particularly pertains to our pre-K to third grade students. So take it away, Allison.
All right. Hi, welcome. Thank you for being here this afternoon. I'm very excited to share this work because it's been new learning on the education side as well. But what I've seen with students is making me really eager to continue to try this. This is me. So I'm currently teaching transitional kindergarten in Los Altos School District. In my career, I've done a lot of things. I've taught fifth, I've taught third. I was a principal for a few years, and I also have a child development permit at the program director level. So I have kind of a wide range of perspectives on students and learning. And I think the way that I'm seeing AI be helpful toward this idea of student agency from our youngest students to our oldest students in high school is pretty amazing. So today we're going to talk about kind of why this idea of co-creating curriculum with students is effective. I'm going to talk a little bit about the spark, right? Where that spark is there. It just needs to be noticed and cultivated, right? So talking about what invitations, provocations are, and how that affects emergent curriculum with our students, and then also talking about centering student wonderings to generate questions for inquiry. And then I'll show you some kind of images and describe a little bit about how it happened in my classroom is happening. Okay, so you can kind of see here, here's how we kind of ground ourselves in this idea that learning is a social process, the idea of autonomy, relatedness, co-creation is fostering those things that intrinsic reward, and that collaboration is really increases student engagement. And the social piece too, which was an unexpected part of this. So I'll talk about that as we go. Um, and again, they're actively constructing knowledge to engagement. And you can kind of see, but just these are kind of pretty core theories in learning, and it all links to this as well. So again, that social piece, that idea of opening up when you approach an inquiry, approach learning from an inquiry standpoint when that is what you are intending to do. It lets kids at the entry point, the on-ramp is at their zone of proximal development because they are driving it. And it can be multiple entry points for different students. So that also Vygotsky. Okay, so I also think it's really important to tie it into what we know about the National Association for the Education of Young Children and some of their guiding principles with early childhood. And I just called out a few things from some of their position papers that idea of exercising choice and agency within the context of a planned environment, being active constructors of their own understanding, and initiating and regulating their own learning activities, at different points during the day. Um, I'm not going to go deep into it in this webinar, but as we have shifted in TK and Los Altos, shifted our practice to this younger age, because we now have kids starting that are just barely 4 or might be 3 for a couple of weeks. And so they are very young. And what we were noticing is when we are starting to adhere to these principles more strongly, behaviors are starting to drop in, not disruptive, but these more intense behaviors, dysregulated behaviors from students are starting to kind of melt away when they are actively engaged and helping construct their own learning at their own pace. So that is kind of a side benefit to that. And again, there's just a couple of other pieces related to, the idea that they are born eager to learn, and we want to foster that rather than, squish it down when they get to school. And then I think from the preschool transitional kindergarten learning foundations, which are the new standards for TK in California, that idea of integration of learning is really perfect for what we're talking about with how to no curriculum comes integrated or very integrated. And being able to use AI absolutely helps you decide, I want to integrate this and this, put it together and give me something, amazing for kids based on their questions. And that is the power of AI for this. So there are some things related to that in the Department of Education's PTKLFs, we call them. And then this idea of deeper learning out of Harvard, it's a Hewlett Foundation, but Dr. Mehta out of Harvard has really kind of taken this topic and gone deeper. Deeper learning is the understanding of not just the surface features, but the underlying structures or ideas. And that I've absolutely seen as I've used AI. Okay, so here's just a little entry point here. So this idea of co-creation or the starting point is their curiosity about something. What I really like is this dynamic collaboration between the teacher and the students. And that has been my experience as I've done a few different kind of units with them on this. It's certainly definitely research backed related to ECE, early childhood education practices. And I have absolutely seen that it enhances engagement, inclusivity, and student motivation. These are just a couple of things. You're going to see a little bit more of this in a sec. Okay, so my beginning process was that we wanted to and make sure all voices were heard and that there was some discussion. And so the other piece of especially early childhood classrooms, but I'm going to say I think this is equally as important all the way up the grade levels, is it needs to start with their language, their oral language with each other, right? So you establish a provocation, something that they're talking about that is everyone can see it and talk about it. But then they need to be talking with each other in order to activate some of that either prior thinking or prior knowledge or just, oh, I know this about volcanoes. What do you know? So in my class, the sort of first unit I did with this was I just picked up, and it's very observational for the teacher, there was just a lot of talking about volcanoes. At some point in the year, I had not done anything to teach about it yet. So I thought this might be the place that I can do this. This might be enough. There's enough shared interest about this topic. So couple of provocations I used. We did a few read alouds of nonfiction books at the appropriate level. Sometimes it was just sharing, the images and not necessarily reading all the text, but talking about what we were seeing. But I wasn't teaching yet. I was just kind of introducing, and we were doing a lot of wondering. And so the next day, then we created a list of their more specific wonderings. And I'm going to go back a slide because this list right here, the questions about volcanoes, you can see it better in this picture. It was fascinating what 4 and 5-year-olds were coming up with. Even if they were similar questions, I included them because it was more that every child got a chance to articulate what they were thinking and wondering. So what I did then, and that was in front of them, they were watching me chart all their questions. So then my work on the side was to go into the unit planner, the AI unit planner that I use. And the one I use has, you can say, I want to use these state standards. You can say, I want to use, for my level, the PTKLFs. And I chose to focus on foundational literacy, science, and visual and performing arts. I could have also done the physical, more physical activity section, motor skills, that kind of thing. But I wanted to focus on just these three because I felt like they were going to be, I wanted a literacy link. I wanted obviously science and then visual and performing arts. So I could see which of these sort of standards, if you will, or skills can I link in to this knowledge that we're building. So again, very integrated. So there's a little bit better picture of the question one. So they shared, I charted, and then I use and I also, the tool that I use, you can say, I want one lesson, or I want 2 or 3 weeks. I want to cover this. I want small group. I want both whole group and small group. And that was very helpful because in TK, there's some things we're doing in whole group and some things we're doing in small group. So that was something that I found, again, was an efficiency thing for me as a teacher to be able to generate something that gave me not just kind of a big, all these whole group things, but I could vary whether I wanted whole group or small group. I could also vary if I wanted an added added adjustments for if I had English learners, or if I was doing tier 2 work with some kids, I could say, give me a small group setting, a small group activity on volcanoes, but that will help my students who are still working on the ABCs. So I could get really nitty gritty. Okay, this is just an example from my, and I believe, just so you know, this link will work. You will have to log on to, you'll have to establish an account with this company, Learning Genie. But then you can view that doesn't cost anything, and then you can view the details behind this, and you can see here that each of the different preschool, transitional kindergarten learning foundations are listed there by each of these different topics each day. There's large group, there's small group, and when I would click on those, it gave me this very detailed, plan for the day, which was very helpful. Okay, so this is my favorite part. This was what was kind of amazing is as we started going through, there were definitely specific things that we were doing in class during these, whole group activities. But what was kind of amazing was that the kids were on their own, completely independently, and this was very much that idea of student agency, manifesting what they were learning during free play. And the extent to which that happened blew me away because you see it kind of trickle out into their free play. That's how you might be doing something that's resonating with young children. But the level at which they took it, and the picture of the student on the left, or the little boy there, he's holding up a picture that he drew and started doing some writing there, right? He actually started wanting to label, and it doesn't spell anything that would match that picture, but that's a literacy piece. He was already starting to say, "Ooh, there are many volcanoes here." The more amazing thing to me was the magnet toys that he's holding in his other hand. Those are there's nothing about those that would make you think you could make a volcano. He came up to me and he said, "Look, I made a volcano erupting." And the red on the top is the lava coming out. And this student is an English learner, and he was one of my quietest students last year. And so when we talk about equity, in many ways, I feel like when we are approaching the learning in a way that is making it accessible for all students, and part of that is making sure that we've captured their interest, that we're working with their genuine curiosity about something, and we're framing it in ways that are very contextualized for them and meaningful, and they're doing a lot of talking and listening. This is how we know this is learning going on, right? He's showing it in many ways, even if he's not necessarily always being able to talk and use the language that way. So that was very exciting. The picture on the right, this was another one where this was one of the activities from the prompt, from the lesson, the unit planner. And I have paint crayons. They're these really nice materials that give very vivid colors. But after just a few sessions, we try to do process, not product. So we're not so focused on everybody's going to cut out a volcano that's going to look the same, but and what we said, the prompt for this particular art, so this is one of the art pieces of it, the visual and performing arts piece, was, hey, draw a volcano. What are we going to need to have for a volcano? What are the elements, the details that you might need to include in this? So we talked about all that ahead of time. We've talked about the idea that it's magma when it's in the volcano, it's lava when it flows out. We had talked about types of volcanoes, cone volcanoes, shield volcanoes, and so they had a sense. Some of them, were able to show. You could see when you looked at the group as a whole, the different types of volcanoes. And it was, again, to look carefully and interpret what they were doing. They were not just casual pictures. The kids really put a lot of thought into what they were doing. So again, that feedback to me is telling me this is resonating on a different level than I had seen before. Okay, so again, here were the questions, some of the questions, and then that led into the being able to input those into the tool, define that I wanted a 3-week plan focused on, science, visual, and performing arts, and the literacy PTKLFs. And some of the other things that the pictures that I've included here, the books all of a sudden, as we were going a little deeper, and I wasn't reading all of these books, but we started talking about, I got them all from the library. And I said, gosh, some of the books I was reading to them had great cutaways. They had illustrations that you could see down into a volcano and just interesting pictures that were resonating with things that we had talked about. And what started happening is kids would come, they would be holding these nonfiction, so informational text, clearly way above their reading level, but they were processing them. They were in depth looking through them. And they'd bring me a book and open it up and say, look, here's a picture and it's showing, and they'd be using the language we had talked about. So I said, gosh, maybe we should put a post-it, if you want to put a post-it in places in these books where you think that would be really interesting or helpful to somebody else who wants to see more about volcanoes. And so, I mean, there must have been a dozen books, and there were probably 10 post-its in each one, which again, as I'm observing this, thinking to myself, I am, these kids are being drawn into, really digging into informational text, and then they're coming and talking about those images and using the language that we are learning. And that is all the precursor you need, right? So when volcanoes comes up, I think it's sixth grade, science in middle school, that they get deeper into earth science. And so the other literacy piece there is now we've planted vocabulary that when they get it and need to be able to really use it when they're learning about this from a more academic standpoint, when they're reading and writing, these aren't going to be the first time that they've heard some of this vocabulary. So again, it's pretty high level for TK. It's not what I would have expected that they were using this language. So, and then again, the art, you can see them. We used air dry clay to create volcanoes. And that was I think, again, around their own agency. What does this look like? We're not just cutting out pieces and doing a project. This is their understanding of what they want to put into that project. Okay, so a couple of more amazing things. So when we talk about the SEL piece and the equity piece, which was not something I anticipated to the extent that I saw it. And especially in TK, they're very young. They're learning how to be in a room with 20 other kids and share materials and communicate. It can be a little overwhelming. And again, about a week or so into this unit, what I started noticing was in the picture with the sandbox, groups. Each group had, and this was all spontaneous, this was just on their own at recess. They were making volcanoes in the sandbox and cooperating. The level of cooperation among, I don't know, 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds was remarkable. So they were collaborating, they were planning, they were problem solving together, right? All those critical skills that you want to see. But how each little, and they did it on their own. I didn't like set up groups. They just went out there and were doing this, but they started working together because they had a common language and common understanding to be able to talk about it. And so they'd make a volcano, and then because you couldn't make sand erupt out of the volcano, they poured sand as a reverse volcano. So it was funny because they'd pour it in, and it was like, in general, the idea of something coming in or out of it. Another thing with the drawings that we did, I realized after they finished them, another early childhood practice before they become writers on their own is when they've done this different kinds of amazing, drawings, is to say, tell me about that. And then take their dictation and what do you want to say about this? Again, here they are using high level science language, vocabulary, accurate language, magma versus lava, all kinds of different things. We talked about an ash cloud. That's what this one was. Can't quite read it, but it's definitely got more of an ash cloud over it. And I think kind of the one of the most remarkable things that happened out of all of this was that top picture where the kids are walking on the like stepping stone kind of things. So they were out at recess and it was just the TK, not the kindergartners, and I was in the room. And it was super quiet. Like it's never that quiet at recess. So I went outside and it was quiet as could be. And they're taking all these different outdoor toys that we have and working together to line them all up. And what they did was they were then lining up and making their way across all of these things. And if somebody stumbled or knocked one over, somebody else would get down and fix it and they'd go. And I said, I knew what they were doing. I said, what are you guys doing? What's going on? They said, we made a path across the lava. And the entire class was doing it. And they were helping each other if somebody fell or if they knocked one down. It was truly an unexpected and remarkable thing to see how much this translated into those SEL skills and I think equity because all students were talking with each other and planning. So that was just an amazing these just capture a few of the kind of times during the unit that I was just in awe of what was happening with the kids and didn't predict that it would be like this. So one other similar type of unit that we did, and it's funny that I'm talking about this today because we have started this cycle again this year. A provocation that I use for another type of unit like this is the webcam, the Nest Cam at Big Bear Lake, the Eagles, which I don't know if you've all seen or heard about. It's been widely on the news last year. So we started out, and this is last year. We just started it again this year as an inquiry topic. Wow, what's going on in this webcam? What do you see in this nest? Sometimes there's an eagle there, sometimes there's not. And as we get going with this, again, we're starting to chart their questions. What are we wondering about here? It's based kind of on the Project Zero out of Harvard, which is the what do I see? What do I think? What do I wonder? And so we do a lot of generating of questions. And that continues because one question often a few days later, a week later, will lead to yet another question or a deeper question. And these were just some of the questions for this. And so again, this is just an example of me, in real time charting questions and wonderings and then modeling for them. And again, TK, but I think there are so many ways that this gets easier in some ways as they get older because you can go farther and they're able to do more on their own in terms of documenting their own questions and putting them up on Post-its, around the classroom, things like that. But it's very much modeling the literacy piece for them as well. So we're observing, we're documenting, and then again, it's my way of trying to really reinforce to them that our questions are important, and as is our observations and truly wondering what is going to happen here. And then so finally, this is yet another way of showing so the block in the middle of the tree, we have this very low tree in our playground area. And I came out one day when we were into this Eagle unit, and there were a whole bunch of the outdoor wooden blocks up in the tree. And I had a pretty good idea what they were doing. And they said, oh, we made a nest. We were building a nest. So again, abstract thinking, but it's very at their ZPD, right? Oh, we can add to this nest with blocks. So I realize that this is TK. This is the youngest kind of learners. I'm going to go back to the unit planner. So the idea, though, is that up the grade levels, there are ways to do things like you could take a standards-based unit if it's something in history, social studies, or something, a science topic that you kind of need to cover. And you can do that as a starting point with whatever, if you have a set curriculum that you're using. But when we then maybe let that become the inquiry, what questions do we still have? What are we interested in more? What topic came up within this study that we want to delve more into? And so, different people all over the state are doing things like saying, well, let's create expert groups. Hey, who's interested? Let's generate some questions about this topic. Who's interested in digging into this kind of question related to that unit we just did? Who's interested in this? And creating maybe some expert groups that then can talk, can do some additional research. And then what does the product look like? It's endless what you could do. And that's something else you can define with AI is let's define what are some products that might be appropriate? Do we want to have them, develop an FAQ that's on social media or that's available to everybody through Google in the classroom, through Google Classroom? You can click on this and there's the answer for that. Another big piece of this is then how can we take this and make it something that we could share with others, right? So is it then that expert group goes and teaches this to a different grade level that it might somehow relate to. And when you do integrated planning, you're tapping for students. Gosh, if we're going to go create a product or something that we want to be able to teach another grade or flip-flop with another class and we want to share some learning about that, we have to make sure that it has the look of literacy, that it is actually something that somebody else could, read or interpret and understand what you're doing. So, one of the opportunities, and Learning Genie is a company that developed the tool that I have found very helpful to use. But I wanted to put this up here too, that this idea of what does it look like up the grade levels. This was a webinar, a panel that we did at ISTE last year, and it's got all the way up. My grade level, it's got a third or fourth grade teacher, middle school, and then high school. And so this, I think, was a really wonderful look at the continuum of what using AI in a classroom. And I think the two older grade teachers also use Edu protocols. So that's another way to see how that's another piece of this particular tool that you can, check and say, yes, I would like to include that as well, if you are familiar with that. That's not one that I use, but it certainly looked interesting. And I am so happy for anyone that wants to reach out and chat more about this. I put my email there. And the nice thing, and I just wanted to, in case people are curious about this, getting to the end of this webinar, if you are interested and you'd like to look at what Learning Genie's tool is, I believe their lesson planner, like a one lesson planner, is pretty easy when you go onto their site and establish just register. I don't think there's a charge to use that. This QR code, though, will give you the opportunity to create 4 free units. So you can kind of dabble or if you've really been curious about how to use AI to do something that you want to do, this would allow you to do that. I don't work for them. I just consult with them. But this is how I generated the volcano unit and parts of the eagle unit too. So, yes, so I've happily been exploring. This is certainly new for me too. So I encourage you to, it's satisfying as a teacher to see kids going way farther than you ever thought, and affecting their confidence and the way they have relationships with each other too. So Justin, any questions or?
Yeah, I have just a quick question.
Sure.
So would you use those units like next year, or are you saying that like this is kind of redefining your teaching in a way where you can authentically craft units around the same standards, but it matches the interests of those students in that particular class?
So that's a great question. I could, if there was an interest and it seemed like there was enough alignment with a new group of kids, I certainly could bring it, recycle it. But I think, or I could recycle elements of it. But I think the goal is because it's so easy to generate because I'm not doing, as much of the labor once I can see it generate and then I know, and I can adjust and say, oh, no, actually for this unit, I want to modify, I can go back and modify. So if I had, with this group of kids this year, and they may or may not be as into volcanoes. So I probably wouldn't just do volcanoes because I did it last year. I would definitely be, again, keeping my feelers out right now for what are the things that they're interested in that are either overlapping a little bit or is it a completely different topic? And we're about that point this year that I'm starting to kind of sense what might they be interested in. But I could, or I can generate a completely different topic, but I don't have to be the expert, right? I can just say, huh, okay, let's try that. Let's see what they're interested in this year. Yeah, good
Yeah,
question.
fascinating. Oh, go ahead.
Any other questions or wonderings?
I do have a couple wonderings and questions.
Sure.
So it's interesting because when you started talking and I was looking at the age range and I was like, how are we putting kinders or TKs in front of AI, right? So what I'm hearing is that AI allows you to really scaffold based on like child-led interest. So you can literally improvise because they talking a lot about insects and you're like, oh, look at the life cycle of cicadas and and create and it's interesting because in our school we're a parent participation school and some parents lead electives or creative X or things like that, and we are currently discussing how are we going to create templates to help the parents create their lessons plan faster and quicker and then present it to the teacher for like their final validation. So what we were thinking is maybe each teacher could have their AI know their style. And so the template that the parent would use is almost like a brainstorming with an AI teacher. I would never say that because it's a little scary, but like a persona, and then the teacher last pass would be really validating age appropriateness, but the AI would know what the teacher prefers or style or anything. Do you feel that it has learned your style? Sorry, it's a long-winded question.
That it's what my style? Oh, it's learn my style. Um, it's interesting. I feel like I had so many options as I was refining. Um, I don't know that I saw that level yet, but I know that as I was, clicking on my preferences, and each unit's different. I think that's the other thing is each unit's different in that I may want to emphasize one set of standards for one unit and a different set of standards for another, depending on the topic. But what I do think to what you were saying about the parent piece. Uh, and I haven't done, other than like a chat GPT, I haven't done any other specific to, education AI tools. But one thing that I found very helpful about this, and there maybe is some overlap with what you're talking about, is when it generated, for me, when it generated the small group, and again, I kept going in and saying, oh, make it a simpler one or a shorter,
Mm-hmm.
I just want a 10-minute small group, whatever it was. When I did a small group, it's so detailed that if I was having a parent do a small group, or if I had a substitute, or my aide that I
Yeah.
wanted to be able, I could literally print it out and boom, there it goes. And it's very crystal clear. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were talking about. I know you're not quite, the parents are coming up with it themselves, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting thing to think that standardizing sort of the flow or the template is really helpful. And that is what I found when I used that. But that's, I think, a function of the tool. That wasn't me independently crafting that. It was just when I said, I would like a small group, overview that's got active engagement, that kind of thing. That part I think is really helpful. But that brings up a really good point with having volunteers or parents
Yeah.
leading information as well, leading learning.
There's a question in the chat from Yolanda and asking if this is similar to Factors AI platform, if you're familiar.
I am not familiar with that one. like I said, I haven't used I haven't gone deep with any other tool. Um, and the what you most certainly can do, again, this is, this tool is something that in general I think districts tend to buy, right? It's a school level kind of thing. And I'm not here to sell anything. But they do at the lesson level. And so for both of you, I think it might be interesting just to, if you go on and just start exploring a little bit on this site. They are one of three, just FYI, they are one of three kind of companies in the state that are approved by the state board of, or by CDE, the California Department of Education, for the developmental, let's see, the DRDP, developmental results profile, which is something that you have to do in preschools, like at preschools and state preschools and things. And they have a online feature to take that data and do those observations. That was kind of how they started. This AI function now, so they're, as a company, they work very closely with CDE. So I just know that by reputation, I had heard of them related to this other tool. And this seems to be one that I think at the lesson level, they are definitely, it's available to try without, with no commitment or cost or whatever, but to get a feel for it, I think. So I don't know about the other one that you talked about, the other tool, but I'm curious. It's something that I'd be interested in looking at as well. But I felt good about what I saw out of this one for sure. Yeah.
Yolanda, do you want to hop off mute at all? I mean, I'm trying to find the site of Factors AI, but there's a lot of Factors AI, which is, you know, I guess the world we live in, but um,
That's okay. I found it because I was wondering too, and it did report, it did give a comparison that Learning Genie was focuses ECE and Head Start, and Factors AI education is best for K through 12.
So that I can tell you, so the Learning Gene, that product I was talking about, the preschool thing, definitely that was the profile. But their AI tool is all the way up. It's got
Okay.
all like K-12 standards so that when you're trying to generate something, you can check it's fourth grade. I want these specific standards. And I think they now have a connection to Edu Protocols if you were looking to try to link into something like that. So that webinar might be interesting for you to look at, the one that I linked in the previous slide, because this is TK all the way up to high school, how the generating units is used. So you're right. It is definitely started out as a more of an ECE kind of company. But this tool is a TK12 if you decide to take a look at it. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions, or how you're starting to dabble in AI with your kids?
Well, I like the platform. Does it have those pictures that you, I mean, I know you added pictures from the student, but did it have pictures in it?
You mean when it generates?
Yes.
So, yeah, there's images so I mean, it's like that. You see that? That's just a screenshot of one of the plans, where you know,
Very AI images.
yeah, they're just generic. They're just generic pictures. But the one other thing, kind of a little bit related to what you're talking about, they have, as you get in, you could even say, I want to use these texts, these books, because I'm going to use them, or I need ideas for what books to use, and it'll link in freely available, like a read aloud on YouTube or something. So if you don't have to go out and buy the book or get it at the library. It puts it right there so that you can click and use it. That was the other thing I found very helpful was, yes, I needed to get the air dry clay so they could make the physical volcanoes, but to the greatest extent possible, it's going to try to, we asked, one of the questions was, well, what about, one of the kids' question was, are there any volcanoes in California? Actually, you can see it right in the middle of the page there. And it was like, oh, interesting. Like I'm into watching the one in Hawaii and the one in Iceland. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I know
Mount
there's,
Shasta?
Exactly, exactly. So, um, but it pulled up and we did a little dive into Mount Lassen and the history of all that. And they it connected all the links for things I could show them, and websites that were appropriate for kids to look at. So, that part was also why this was so efficient. It was just I didn't have to go digging for all that, and they were good. The links they provided were and as in any AI tool, when you can get those links in there, it's very helpful for our time because we're all exhausted as teachers. I'm going to speak for myself, but I'm wondering you all might be feeling that way too sometimes during the school year.
And my other question is, could you add in some GLAD strategies?
Oh, for
Uh,
sure.
oh, wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I did not specifically prompt it to add in GLAD strategies. And I don't know that it would necessarily recognize it as the term GLAD, guided language acquisition design
Oh,
for those of you that might not know for English learners. But most definitely, I'm GLAD trained, and I could easily have said, I want some oral language, chants and poems, that I could use for that's a really great question. I'm curious now to go in and see if it recognizes um, the different kinds of GLAD activities that we might ask for. That's a great. I'm going to jot that down and go play with it and see if it recognizes that because it should be able to pull something like that up. That's the thing though, is if you also say I want to. I want some special like previewing of vocabulary. I want a little small group to preview, concept and vocabulary with, specify a range of level of English learner, 100% it would do that, which again is just really nice when you're talking about this curriculum that this learning that doesn't exist in a textbook. It's very genuine and authentic for those students, and so to be able to do that efficiently, we can do it, right? We know how to do that, but it does take some time to put together. So that's a great question, though. The prompting for English learner stuff definitely is in there. Yeah.
Great.
I have
Oh,
another, sorry, Justin, just a quick one. So you're mentioning what you're doing with kindergartners. Their literacy level is not there yet. With older kids, like first, second, and mostly third grader, would you put them in front of AI as a scaffolding tool, like, to build their inquiry?
I personally think that, and I think that the state, right, has just established the whole thing with how are we going to, AI literacy, right? Kids need to be discriminating and discerning about, what they're looking at with AI, or what they're trying to generate, which is, I think, what comes up a lot. Um, I almost think that in some ways, getting, I would want to do that whole group with kids that little to say, where your it's modeled in a way that is very much defined about how we use it, what genuine question do we have? How are we taking these, the results that we're getting? Um, I think I would be, because I think that kids at that developmental age still don't, I mean, I almost think all the way through elementary school, it's very,
Yeah.
yeah, I would not, I personally
So
don't think I
you,
would put young
yeah.
like that.
So you would use AI mostly to teach them AI literacy, not AI to teach them about topics. That's what you're saying. And yeah. And I have a really good example. I have fourth grader, and they have an elective about making a business, and he built his
Oh,
whole business plan in Copilot, and we helped him. And then Copilot, he made cookies, and Copilot give him recipes, and then quantities and supermarket. And then here we are in the supermarket trying to figure out how many pounds is 9 cups of flour because AI gave everything in cups. And and so I thought it was a great example for him to understand that you need to challenge and does it make sense in the reality? Like, okay, 9 cups is great for cooking, but not for buying, like these kind of, yeah,
right. The limits. Where are the limits of what it can do, and
exactly.
how do you have to keep prompting?
Mhm.
That's a
Yeah,
great, yeah, that's a great example. That is a great example. Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
okay. Well, this has been great, Allison. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for participating. The uh, slides and the recording will be in the folder that you all have. And so if you have any questions about the presentation, feel free to email Allison. She provided her email address in the slide deck. And we hope that you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.